Hello everyone and welcome to today's conversation. We are diving into a topic today that a lot of people are unaware about or even misheard about. It is dematerialization of physical shares or unclaimed dividends. Today we have Mr. Cyrus Gonda with us representing Crystal Peak Wealth, and we have an ongoing conversation with him. Thank you, sir, for joining in us today.
Thank you.
The one of the really question that I want to ask is that actually possible that somebody may have unclaimed shares or dividends in today's world as well?
Yes, it's a good question, and many of them do, many more than you would think. It's quite a common phenomenon. What happens is, many years ago, the individual himself or his parents would have bought these shares, and over time, they get forgotten. Due to things like address changes, which is quite common in large cities, untracked paperwork, and just basic forgetting and oversight, these would actually get shoved into the file and forgotten. So yes, these things only come up when there are family discussions or some topic of this nature does arise, and that's when people realize that yes, they do have a fortune sitting with them which they don't really know about.
What kind of situation does it usually happen in?
Yeah, so this mostly happens in inheritance cases where physical shares or investments made many years ago are just forgotten over a period of time.
Is unclaimed wealth actually that common in India, or it's a rare situation?
Yes, we at Crystal Peak Wealth have realized that it is very common, much more common than you would think. But people feel that it does not apply to them because they assume that they never had anything of this nature. It's only when you actually clean out your cupboard or you come across some old files out of chance that you realize that yes, I also do have a lot of these unclaimed wealth certificates lying around with me. So it's a very common phenomenon.
What are the most common situations where people suddenly discover they have unclaimed investments?
Okay, good. So this issue usually crops up during important life events. You know, when, for example, during inheritance issues, when somebody in the family passes away and then there is distribution of wealth to be looked at, and then people realize, yes, there was something bought long ago. Or even, for example, when people are organizing their financial matters once in a while, maybe after a couple of years or even maybe more than that. So these are the situations during which this sort of thing comes across, because they come across old share certificates, dividend warrants and so on, which they never realized that they could have claimed in their lives. So they're cleaning out old stuff, and that's when this particular thing hits them. Yes, this is also belonging to me. It's just that I never knew about it.
So when they say unclaimed share or dividends, what does that really mean in simple terms?
Okay, in simple terms, it means that assets, money that belongs to you, but you're not aware about it and you're not accessed it in a very long time. So typically this could be in the form of dividends that have not been claimed or shares that have not been dematted or transferred. These are all the ways in which that could exist. The key point is the asset still belongs to you. It still exists. Only it is not actively in your control. And then it is within your control to get it done.
So after how long do these investments move to IEPF, and what does that mean for the investor?
Okay, in simple terms, this means that if the dividends remain unclaimed for 7 consecutive years, then the dividends along with the shares to which they are attached get transferred to a government-controlled fund, which is for the safety of the individual itself. This doesn't mean that the investor loses control of the shares. They don't go out of his circuit. But the point is, the money is still there. The procedure to get it back becomes a little more tedious and more compliance-ridden.
Okay, so once it goes there, can people still recover it?
Yes, absolutely. It still belongs to them. Recovery is absolutely possible. The only thing is that the process involves more documentation and compliance. So it becomes a little more complicated and lengthy, but that is what we at Crystal Peak Wealth are there for. That is where our expertise lies, in getting it back for you in your name in the least possible time.
What's the biggest misconception people have about recovering their shares or dividends?
Okay, that's a good question. The biggest misconception is that people feel that recovery is either not possible or not worth the effort. These are incorrect. It's only because people assume that the process could be too complicated or not worth its while. But in most cases, it is definitely possible to get it recovered if you are the legal heir and entitled to it, and the value could be very significant.
What exactly is dematerialization of physical shares in simple terms?
Okay, in simple terms, it just means that you are converting the physical paper which you have, which was the older system, into digital electronic format. That is the way that the system works now, because all investments are managed digitally. And it's needed to get it digital to get it into the system and active. So without this, the shares remain inactive and they're not of any use to you. So that's why this is a process which needs to be followed.
When we say converting physical shares into demat form, what does that actually mean for an investor?
For an investor, it actually means that you are making the shares usable in today's system. Today's system is different to what it was before the year 2000, where you had physical shares traded. Now you need to have them in digital format for the same tracking, selling, and managing of these shares. So there's nothing different that's actually happened. It's just that physical shares have been coming into a electronic or a digitized format. In fact, it removes the risks and the limitations which were associated with the physical documents and brings everything into a secure digital format which is easy for you to control and use.
So without dematerialization, can those shares be used?
Not really. The physical shares cannot be used today. So dematerialization is absolutely relevant and important in order to make these shares active as well as transferable.
Why do some dematerialization requests gets rejected or delayed?
Yes, you're right. A few do get rejected and delayed, and this happens because of mismatch in records, things like signature differences, which could happen over a period of time, incorrect detail, some minor detail left out, that is also possible, or could be incomplete documentation at the time of filling up the forms, which is again natural and it does happen. So these are the reasons that sometimes these things do get rejected. But since many of these shares are quite old, maybe decades old, maintaining consistency becomes a challenge, and this is where Crystal Peak Wealth comes into the picture and avoids the delays.
What are some common mistakes people make when they try to recover these assets themselves?
See, one of the most common mistakes is that people misunderstand the complication of the process. They think that it's very easy. It's like just opening a bank account. It is not that easy. It requires expertise, and that's where Crystal Peak Wealth comes into the picture. So people often, when they try to do it themselves, submit incomplete documents, they misunderstand the requirements of the system, or they try to handle everything themselves without proper clarity. See, everybody is an expert or something on the other, and this is again a subject which requires expertise. So this leads to delays when people misunderstand the complexity of the process. Rejections and frustration can come in, and many people actually give up halfway, and what could have been a fortune coming into their hands is just left idle.
So is that the way where delays actually happen?
Yes, exactly. Even minor details overlooked can actually slow down or even block the process.
Why does the process become especially complicated in inheritance or legal hire cases?
It's because in these cases, ownership needs to be legally established, and that itself is a process. So, recovery can only happen once the ownership is legally established, and this involves multiple documents to be produced, validations of these documents at times, and sometimes coordination between different stakeholders in the family and external agencies also. So that's what adds sometimes to the delay or the time process.
So it's not just financial but also a legal aspect.
Yes, absolutely, which is why such cases require more careful and expert handling.
For NRIs, what additional challenges come into play in such cases?
Yes, so this is a very special type of a case. NRIs do face additional challenges in dematerialization because managing documentation needs to be done from overseas, which itself is time consuming and requires more steps in the process. And with compliance requirements and coordinating with authorities in India does become a challenge at times. But that's where our expertise comes in. The distance and procedural differences in case of domestic and NRI people often make the process more time-consuming and complex. But at Crystal Peak Wealth, we have handled multiple NRI clients satisfactorily, and they have had a seamless experience in getting their shares and dividends recovered.
So what typically cause delays in this kind of recovery processes?
Yes, so there are delays that happen at times, and typically these are due to documentation gaps, then it could be verification issues, which sometimes could be complex, or even procedural timelines which need to be followed. Even small discrepancies can result in back and forth communication, which extends the overall time, because every step would take a time gap between it comes through.
So how long does the recovery process usually take in some cases?
Yes, it does take time, and the timeline depends upon the complexity on a case-to-case basis. In general, if it's a smooth case, it can take about 3 months, but cases involving establishment of legal heirs and their validity, or older records at times, which may be a little more time consuming to trace, may take a little longer due to additional verification requirements.
So patience is needed here.
Yes, absolutely. It's important to follow the process patiently and correctly rather than rush it. Because if you do rush it, chances are that you may make mistakes and make the process even more lengthy. At Crystal Peak Wealth, we give a committed timeline to every investor or legal heir after understanding the entire case in detail. So it's better to be secure rather than hurried. That's what we believe in.
If someone is unsure whether they have unclaimed investments, what is the first step they should take?
Okay, very good question. The first step to take is to review whatever financial records they can have or they can locate or find. Even basic information can help identify if something exists. So from there, you can take the proper guidance of experts like us, and you can simplify the process and help things move forward in a smoother manner.
Should they act immediately or wait?
Yes, it's always better to act as early as you can once you find that you do have assets of this kind in your name. The sooner you start, the sooner and smoother the process will complete.
Thank you guys for tuning in with Crystal Peak Wealth, and thank you Mr. Cyrus for joining in us today. It was a wonderful session here. At Crystal Peak Wealth, we help physical equity shares into dematerialization format, from succession to transmission to IEPF claims. Crystal Peak Wealth do it all seamlessly. Thank you.